Isn't it amazing how fast time flies? I suspect as we reflect on time, it is moving at such a rapid rate that we wish we could slow it down. But you can't. It just keeps unfolding in front of us. I think especially about the young people who started a school year in September. And it's moving so fast that especially those who are in the senior class will discover it's over before they hardly ever had a chance to understand what was happening. Actually, I remember that from my own school. I remember, for example, that one of the questions a lot of kids will ask as you draw nearer to graduation is, what are you going to do after you get out of school? And if you were a senior in any school system, you probably were asked that question at some point. What are you going to do when you're out of school? I remember that in my senior year was the year that I received my call to ministry. And so when my classmates would ask me that, I would say, I'm going to be a minister. And I didn't realize that somehow that would change their perception of me at all. But it did. And in some good ways. Because as the time unfolded, the way we conversed with each other and the way we related to each other somehow was transformed into a different sort of way of being together. And it became especially obvious to me when the wrestling season started. And the first wrestling match that was scheduled, the competitors on my team came to me and said, would you pray with us before we go out for the match? And every wrestling match we had, that was the request. You know, it's interesting, isn't it? That when we claim Jesus Christ as Lord, and when we are identified as a believer in Christ, it not only changes us, but it changes those around us in some way. I didn't realize at the time what a significant change that meant for them. They were somehow changed because I was changed. And isn't it the case when we take the mantle of Christ seriously, how it does impact the way we live and the way we move, the way we speak, the way we relate and connect with each other? I think about that especially when I read this particular account from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus is saying to those who are in religious positions of authority and power and influence in his day, doesn't this gospel have an impact on you? Doesn't it somehow transform you to begin to think and act differently in terms of your role as leaders of the religious life of this nation? Do you not see and understand what God is at work doing through me so that the message of the gospel and the good news can touch human hearts in a way that gives them hope and encouragement and new purpose? Instead, you continue practices that weigh heavily upon the shoulders of those who need to feel some sense of relief and new life. You continue to weigh upon the human family expectations that nobody could live up to, even if they were at their very best. They're simply too weighty, and they bear down as a heavy burden on God's people. Don't you understand that God would have you be transformed so that those you work with and share the good news with can experience that transformation and that new life? Why is it that what Jesus was saying fell on deaf ears? Why is it that the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the people in influence and power and control, could not somehow grasp the good news that Jesus Christ was trying to bring into this world? And then I ask myself, what about the world in which we live? This gospel has been with us for generation after generation after generation. It is not new news. It is good news. And the good news is for every generation to somehow experience that transforming power that the Spirit of God can bring to our daily lives. But if we can't accept that transforming power, how does it impact and affect those around us? I think back on those days in my senior year in high school. I think about what it meant to my colleagues on our team, a sports team, to have one of their own pray with them before they went out for competition. I was sort of overwhelmed by that. And yet, I did it because I felt called to do it. Jesus is calling those Pharisees and Sadducees and scribes to a new way of representing what God is about in the world. Is not Jesus calling all of us to a new way, to a new understanding, a deeper commitment? If we take upon ourselves the yoke of Jesus Christ, does it not change us and change those around us? I don't know what the long-range impact was on my members of the team of which I was a part, but I know in that moment it made a difference to them, and it made a difference in me. Friends, every time we take the opportunity to bear the yoke of Christ wherever it is and in whatever the circumstance may be, it changes me and you, and it changes those around us. Think what a significant difference that can make in this world if we do understand the power of the good news to impact and affect our lives in such positive and helpful ways. My prayer is, and unfortunately, Jesus prayed for it as well as he talked about the scribes and the Pharisees. They were not happy with what he had to say. Friends, the world is not happy with what we have to say. People in power and position and influence, people who want to amass wealth, are not interested in good news. They could care less. But the question is not about them. The question is about us. Because if we take Jesus Christ seriously, if we take that message of good news to heart, it's a transforming power. It is a renewing power. It is an encouraging power. Not as the world understands power, but it is transforming in a way that makes us aware of what we have to share with the world around us. And that's significant because we live in troubled times, and I suspect every generation has lived in troubled times. The world has not changed. The question is, are we going to be changed by the presence of Jesus Christ in such a way that we are willing to impact the world for the better? It's unfortunate, you see. The scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees were so ingrained in their position and in their place in the life of the nation, they could not let go of it in order to let God do what God was trying to do. What do we need to let go of? What do we need to let go of? We struggle every day with that question. What do we need to let go of to let God do what God would do in us and through us for the betterment of this world? I still don't really comprehend what God was at work doing with me when I was a senior in high school. But I did it because my friends asked me to do it. And it was a transforming experience for me and for them. And my prayer for them is that as they have matured and grown over these many years, they have remembered that the power of prayer, the power of the presence of Jesus Christ can change life. Now, I think about my years in high school. I wasn't a terrible student. I wasn't a great student. I wasn't a troublemaker, but I wasn't an angel either.
That was a loud comment.
I'm talking about my years in high school, not now. But somehow God sees in all of us that opportunity, that capacity. And what's God seeing in each of us today? What is it? And will we be willing to let go of something in order be at work in us and through us. All of us have to let go of something in order to let God. I don't know what that means for us individually. I can only deal with me. What do I need to let go of? To let God be at work in me and through me. We all have to struggle with that question. The religious people of his day weren't about to let go. But it didn't deter Jesus Christ, because he kept speaking and proclaiming and acting the good news. And it did change not just the life of the people he met along the way, but it has changed the human heart in every generation. Think about that. When we let go and we let God, something happens and we become different people in Jesus Christ. Paul wrote this letter to the church at Thessalonica. What did he have to let go of? I mean, you know the story. He was so adamantly opposed to Jesus Christ that he went on his way to Damascus to persecute people who had embraced the good news. And on the way, he had to let go. And in that moment, he describes it as a light, so blinding he could not see. But from that moment on, the life he led was a life that proclaimed the good news in word and in deed. And when he wrote these letters to the churches, what he was sharing with them was this change that had happened in him. So that this passion he had for persecution became a passion for the good news. Friends, we need to live in this world today with passion. We have to live with passion for things that truly matter. And because we have taken upon ourselves the yoke of Christ, that's the passion that needs to drive us. It's important, you see, because the world travails. The world is in groaning. The world is hurting beyond our imaginations. But there is good news, because we can change that world one person at a time, wherever God leads us, if we let go and let God be at work in us and through us. Let's not be the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes of our time. Let's not be those who hold fast to things that we should let go. Because in letting them go, we give God an opportunity. And God will not pass that up. May God continue